Welcome to Module 9, which is, in this module, we're going to be discussing decoctions. In addition to talking about decoctions, we're also going to make one. It's going to be a super simple recipe. Literally, all you're going to need is a small pot, some cinnamon sticks, and a little bit of water and a burner to boil your water on. Now, before we get to that, I want to talk to you a little bit about what decoctions are. We went over infusions, and decoctions and infusions are very similar in the sense that you are putting plant material into water, bringing it to a boil, and extracting the constituents through water. The difference is that most infusions are made from flowers, herbs, leafy parts of the plant, whereas decoctions are made from bark or seeds or roots or harder materials that come from plants that are, they require a more in-depth method of extraction. Now, we know that with infusions, you don't want to boil the water too long. Typically, like with teas, for example, you bring your water to a boil and then you take the water off the boil. You don't keep the tea boiling in the water because you don't want to cook away the constituents. Well, when you're working with barks and seeds and roots and things like that, you do typically need to boil it more. You need to boil it more because it's going to require more heat and a longer time to really extract those good constituents and essences and all of that stuff. Now, the bonus is that decoctions are more concentrated and stronger than infusions. Many people actually simmer their decoctions for a lot longer than necessary to cause some of the water to evaporate. So the more water evaporates, the more concentrated that remaining liquid is going to be. And so that's one thing that we're going to do today is, of course, we're going to bring our bark to a boil in the water. Then we're going to turn the temperature way down low on simmer, almost off heat altogether. What we want to do after we've had it boil for a little while and we know that those constituents are seeping out, what we want is we just want the water to evaporate. We don't want to cook away the cinnamon attributes and properties. We just want to cook away the water. And we'll get to that. The process of allowing that water to evaporate to the point where your decoction is as concentrated as you would like can be quite time consuming. In fact, it can take 40 minutes and sometimes upwards of an hour. So when I'm doing this video for you guys, I'm going to do it in little bits. Of course, I'm not going to keep you guys hostage for an hour while I do this process. I'll just be recording snippets of it and showing you like that. But I just want to let you guys know that. So if you decide to make a decoction, just know that you're going to need some time. You're going to want to block out a good amount of time to be able to do so. A popular way to use decoctions is to ingest them orally. Other ways that you can use them include adding them to your bath. Depending on what you make them with, they can help alleviate pain, swelling, pull out toxins, those types of things. That would also be a great thing to add in if you had some aches in your back or something like that. You would make a nice decoction with some herbs that are good for relieving pain. And you would go ahead and maybe even add some Epsom salt to your bath, and that would be a wonderful natural remedy that you could use. Other great uses for decoctions include making them into cordials or even syrups. Now, cordials are created when you make something into a decoction and then you add liquor to it. Brandy is the most commonly used liquor, but you can use other kinds of liquor as well. And the great thing about adding liquor to your decoctions is that the alcohol will actually preserve their life. So if you were to just leave it steamed alone in herbal decoction, you're gonna maybe be able to use it for a week top, and that's really, really pushing it. You wanna be careful when you start holding on to herbs that long without some kind of preservative. Of course, as we know, liquor, alcohol, all of those things are a natural preservative. So by adding them to your decoction, not only are you creating a cordial, but you're also extending the shelf life of that mixture. Tonics and syrups are both made very similarly. You simply add a sweetener to your decoction. So for instance, for syrups, adding honey to your decoction, a lot of honey, and you'll make it into a syrup. You can add molasses to your decoction and create a tonic. Those are both sweet additives. So if you're gonna make something like a homemade cough syrup or something like that, homemade allergy relief, something that you could give to your children or your littles in your house, then using a syrup or a tonic would be the perfect way to go. With a spoonful of sugar, the medicine goes down, as Mary Poppins used to say. Well, molasses and honey will work just as well. And I don't want to dive too deep into syrups and all of those things because I would love to touch on those in a future course. So stay tuned for that. So now let's take our cinnamon sticks, let's take our pot and our water, and let's go to the kitchen and start brewing up a decoction. Since we're using cinnamon, which is a bark, it is still considered a tea. So cinnamon tea is used frequently for weight loss. And cinnamon also, as you know, because it was on your herbal correspondences sheet, is great for prosperity magic. So if you wanted to make a decoction tea that would help bring in some money as well as help you burn a few pounds, this would work perfectly for that. All right, my witches, we've got our pot. We've got our cinnamon sticks, and you can use more if you want. This is just what I have on hand. You can use as many as you want. Note that the more that you use, the more concentrated it will be. And we've got our water. So what we're gonna go ahead and do first is we're gonna go ahead and pour some of our water into our pot. I'm only gonna fill it about halfway because we do want to cook down as much water as possible. The more water we start with, the longer we're gonna have to wait for that to evaporate. I'm just gonna break up my pieces. My little bark here into good sized little pieces and put it in here. Now that that's done, we're gonna turn the heat on and bring to a boil. It's really starting to look nice in here. You can really start to see the red from the bark coming out. So let's just keep it steady at this boil for just a few more minutes, and then we'll go ahead and turn down the heat. Look at that nice, rich red. And you can also see that our water's already starting to evaporate quite a bit. So let's go ahead and turn our heat down. I let this boil for about 10 minutes before turning the heat down. Now I'm going to turn the heat down to a low setting. Not quite simmering, but low. I just turned it down to low, and you can already see how the bubbling is starting to let up a little bit. I'm going to keep it on this low setting probably for another 5 to 10 minutes before putting it down to simmer. The idea is we want to extract as much as we can from the cinnamon bark and also evaporate that water. We don't want to cook away those good smells, aromas, and natural healing properties. So that's why we definitely want to turn the heat down rather than keeping it on high the whole time. I've got my water pretty dark. My decoction is pretty dark. It's pretty well concentrated. It's bubbling at a really low level that I'm happy with. Just above simmering, actually just probably about simmering really. I had to play with my water to my burner temperature to get it exactly where I want. If you can see, a lot of my water has evaporated already. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to let this sit for another 20 minutes, and then I'm going to show you guys about straining and containing these. So guys, I am really, really happy with the color as well as the level that I've got my water to evaporate by just using the heat. So now what I'm going to allow it to do is I'm just going to let it sit here at room temperature and allow it to cool. Once it's completely cool, I'll go ahead and strain it using cheesecloth in a jar, just like we've strained our other creations during this whole course. But I don't want to do that while it's hot. I'm gonna let that cool. And then hopefully while it's cooling, some more of the steam will evaporate more of that water and making it even more concentrated. All right, witches. Now my decoction has thoroughly cooled. And I've got my cheesecloth on my jar. Of course, remember to indent it just a little bit, just indent it a little bit. And I'm gonna slowly pour this in. I wanna be pretty careful with it. This should be fairly easy to strain because cinnamon is whole. That being said, I wanna move very slowly. I'm spilling some. So to better prevent spills, I'm gonna take this spoon and kind of hold in the cinnamon bark. That way I can adequately do this without fear of those pieces falling, which is what was happening earlier. There we go. And the cinnamon bark will just go straight to my compost. And now I have a nice, strong cinnamon decoction that I can add and make into a tea, add some honey, or use it to draw some prosperity my way. Maybe I can use it for both at the same time. All right, witches, and that concludes our module on decoctions. And next up, we're going to be talking about herbal baths and sweetening and attracting herbs versus bitter and removing herbs and what that means and how you use those specifically in your baths. I'll see you then.